All right, so just imagine waking up one morning, right? You're there, thinking about your day, maybe grabbing coffee, checking your phone, and then boom, you get this notification. Maybe it's a letter. Maybe you just can't log into your bank account anymore. And the system's telling you you're gone. Like, not literally, but legally. Like, the government thinks you're dead.
I mean, it sounds crazy, right? Like something out of like a really bad sci-fi movie.
Totally, totally. But the thing is, it might be happening. As of today, April 10th, 2025, we've got reports saying the Trump administration has actually done this. They've declared over 6,000 living immigrants deceased, like officially dead.
Yeah. And what really hits you right off the bat is just how huge this is.
Hmm.
And it feels, I don't know, kind of Kafka-esque almost. This isn't like, oh, they got your birthday wrong on a form. It's like they're changing your whole status, your whole legal existence, and it basically cuts you off from everything.
Absolutely. So in this deep dive, what we're going to try to do, we're going to try to unpack all this. What's actually happening, why they might be doing it, and why this matters to all of us, even if we're not immigrants ourselves. We're looking at the information we have right now, April 10th, 2025. So, things are developing, but we're going to break it down as best we can. And the key player here is the Social Security Administration, the SSA.
Yeah, the SSA.
Most people, they think retirement, those little cards with your social security number, but they also keep this like giant record. It's called the Death Master File. And it's basically, think of it like a census, but of everyone who's died in the US since 1899, we're talking over 142 million entries. It's like the official record, right? And now, get this, the claim is they've added over 6,000 people who are very much alive to this list. I mean, it's almost unbelievable.
Right. It's like, it totally changes what the Death Master File even is.
Yeah.
They made it to be accurate, to make sure benefits are going to the right people, to prevent fraud. But when you start putting living people on it, I mean, it just throws everything off. And you got to wonder, like, what else could they use this for?
Exactly. So why? Why would they do this? What's the strategy here? People are calling it death by database, but what's the point?
Well, if we look at the bigger picture, the immigration policies right now, it seems like they're trying to make it so hard for these immigrants to live here, they'll just leave on their own. Like, they're making it impossible to work legally, to have a bank account and all that. So they're hoping these people will just give up and self-deport.
Right. This self-deportation idea, we'll get into how realistic that is in a bit. But first, I think we need to understand, like really understand, what being labeled deceased in this official record actually means. What happens to you, in practical terms, when your name's on this list, the list of dead people, even though you're alive?
Well, the worst part, the thing that hits you first, is that your Social Security number is basically useless. It's like that 9-digit number. It's everything, right? You need it to work legally, to open a bank account, to get any kind of benefits. It's like they're cutting off your lifeline to the whole U.S. system.
Yeah, it's not just, oh, I lost my card. It's like you're erased, It's like they're saying you don't even exist here anymore. And we have to remember, a lot of these people, they came here legally during the Biden administration through these temporary programs. And the CBP One app was a big part of that.
Oh, yeah, the CBP One app. That was supposed to make things more organized at the border. People could schedule appointments to claim asylum instead of, it being so chaotic. Reports say over 900,000 people used it, and a lot of them got work permits, usually for 2 years, under this thing called Presidential Parole Authority. So they were here legally, they could work, while they waited for their asylum cases to go through.
So these are people who were following the rules, working, paying taxes, all that. And then in January 2025, Trump's back in office, and, well, everything changes. The timeline shows that just a few days ago, on Monday, April 7th, they revoked legal status for these CBP One users.
And that's a big deal, right? Suddenly, these people are in a really shaky legal position. And it looks like the administration is using this Death Master File thing to, like, really turn up the pressure. They take away your legal status. Then they declare you dead in the system. It's like, how are you supposed to stay in the U.S.? It's like they're making it impossible.
Yeah, it does feel like they're, I don't know, stacking the deck against these people. And what's really worrying, what sources are highlighting, is that we don't even know how they chose these 6,000 people. There's no clear criteria, no logic to it, except that they seem to be focusing on immigrants who came in under Biden's policies.
And that lack of transparency is a huge red flag. It's like, what's the process here? Are they just picking people at random?
Yeah.
It creates so much fear and uncertainty, not just for those directly affected, but for whole communities.
Right, and just think about the everyday stuff. You're trying to pay your rent or buy groceries or even just get gas and your card gets declined because, according to the system, you're dead. Or you show up for work, a job you had legally, and they tell you you can't work anymore. This isn't some abstract bureaucratic mess up. It's messing with people's lives, their ability to just live.
Absolutely. Sources are right to call this out. This isn't just an inconvenience. It's a chain reaction of crises. These people can't earn money, they can't access their own funds, they're suddenly facing homelessness. And, the SSA itself, they had a blog post earlier this year where they talked about how even accidental errors in the death master file can cause serious financial hardship, how it can be devastating for people. So imagine doing this on purpose to thousands of people.
It's chilling, and the fact that many of these immigrants are Latino, and they were, until very recently, legally employed, working here, it just shows how sudden and how harsh this is. Their lives are completely turned upside down overnight. So let's talk about the legal and ethical stuff here. Because is it even legal to use the SSA's death master file this way? I mean, it's for tracking actual deaths, right?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
The SSA has to follow the law, the Social Security Act, and really importantly, the Privacy Act. The Privacy Act is very strict about how government agencies can share personal information. There are some exceptions, but they're usually for law enforcement, for investigations involving crimes, especially violent crimes, and there's nothing to suggest these 6,000 people are involved in anything like that.
But sources say the administration is trying to justify this by talking about national security and citing parts of the Social Security Act. But at the same time, we're hearing from people who work at the SSA or used to work there, and they're worried about breaking privacy laws.
Exactly. Using the Death Master file like this, it just doesn't seem to fit with how it's supposed to be used, legally or practically. And if they're saying national security, well, they need to show a connection between these people and some kind of threat. And from what we know, there's no evidence of that. And then the Social Security Act, they'd have to interpret it in a very specific and probably controversial way to justify this. It's almost guaranteed to end up in court.
And according to reports, those court challenges are already coming. Skye Perryman, she heads Democracy Forward. She's been very clear. She says the administration is acting like they're above the law, like checks and balances are just suggestions. And she's saying they're going to sue as soon as they have enough information. And a lot of other advocacy groups are calling this lawless, too.
In Perryman's statement, it gets to the heart of the matter. It's about whether the executive branch has too much power, whether they're ignoring the rules. And when you've got multiple legal groups gearing up to fight this, it suggests they think it's a pretty strong case.
And it's interesting, sources point out that today, April 10th, the same day all this is coming out, a federal judge actually blocked a different Trump immigration policy. This one was about deporting Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans who had temporary protected status. So it seems like the administration is pushing hard on immigration, but they're running into roadblocks in the courts.
Yeah, and that other case, it shows that there's a bigger fight going on over the administration's whole approach to immigration. They're being aggressive, but the courts are stepping in, making sure they're staying within the law, within the Constitution.
So let's zoom out a bit, look at the bigger picture. Sources are saying this SSA move isn't happening in a vacuum. It's part of a much wider effort by the Trump administration to ramp up deportations since they got back in office in January.
That's really important to understand. This isn't just some weird bureaucratic thing. It's a deliberate strategy to lower the number of immigrants in the U.S. And the reports, they detail all these other measures that show just how big and how intense this crackdown is.
Yeah, some of the things they're reportedly doing are pretty extreme. Like, they're pushing for mass deportations, no due process, no court hearings, and they're even talking about sending immigrants to detention centers in El Salvador and Guantanamo Bay. It's like they're grabbing whatever tool they can find, whether it's the right tool or not.
Like, they don't care if it's appropriate or ethical, as long as it gets the job done.
Yeah.
And using Guantanamo, a place that's usually for terrorism suspects, to hold immigrants, that's a big deal. It raises serious human rights concerns.
And they're not just repurposing things, they're making new deals, too. There's this reported deal between Homeland Security and the Treasury Department that lets ICE access IRS tax records. That's a big one. And it caused so much internal pushback that the acting IRS commissioner actually resigned over it.
And that resignation says a lot. People were really concerned about the ethics and the legality of using tax information for immigration enforcement. Tax records are private, they're sensitive, and giving ICE access to them, it raises all sorts of privacy issues that go way beyond just immigrants.
Then we've got the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, the one Elon Musk is running. They were supposedly looking into the SSA for fraud, but even they ran into legal trouble. A federal judge put a temporary block on their access to personal data because it looked like they were overreaching, doing a fishing expedition.
In the DOGE situation, it shows that balance is important. Yes, the government should be efficient, they should prevent fraud, but they also have to protect people's privacy. They can't just go snooping around without good reason. The court stepping in, it suggests they saw that DOGE was going too far.
So let's go back to the self-deportation idea for a minute. Sources are saying it's just not realistic. It doesn't take into account the real lives of these people, the connections they've made.
Right, people build lives here. They have families, jobs, friends. You can't just expect them to uproot themselves and leave because their legal status changed or because the government wrongly declared them dead. There's a human element here that gets ignored.
It's almost laughable, right? Like someone's built a life here, they're settled, and then they get told they're dead in the system, and they're just supposed to pack up and leave. And sources point out the irony here. The SSA, the agency that's supposed to help people, especially when they're older, is now being used as a weapon against immigrants.
It's like they're using it for the exact opposite of what it was meant for. And this is part of a bigger trend, government agencies doing things that go beyond what they were originally set up to do. It makes you wonder how much power the government should have and whether people can even trust these institutions anymore.
Now, we don't have direct quotes from the 6,000 immigrants affected by this, but we can get a sense of the panic and the chaos they must be feeling. These are people who came here legally. In many cases, they had jobs, they paid taxes.
I can't imagine what it would be like to be told the government thinks you're dead. The stress, the fear, wondering how you're going to survive, how you're going to take care of your family, it must be overwhelming.
And advocacy groups are warning about the consequences. They're saying people could end up homeless, lose their jobs, families could be torn apart. And we're getting some insider perspectives, too, anonymously. One former SSA official reportedly called this policy a betrayal of trust, and another one said it was like using a sledgehammer to crack a walnut. It shows how extreme and inappropriate people think this is.
Yeah, those comments from people who actually know how the SSA works, what it stands for, they give us a different angle. They're saying this goes against everything the SSA is supposed to be about, and that it's just way too much force for the situation.
But sources are also presenting the other side, the people who support this policy. They're saying it's necessary to enforce immigration laws, that it's what Trump promised during his campaign. Assistant Press Secretary Liz Houston, she's quoted as saying this is about removing the monetary incentive to remain in the country.
So their argument is, if you make it impossible for people to survive financially, they'll leave, even if they're not supposed to be here. But, you have to think about the human costs, the ethical side of doing things this way.
Okay, let's look at the numbers again. The Death Master file has over 142 million records. So these 6,000 immigrants, they're a tiny fraction of that, but as sources point out, the impact on those individuals is huge. And when you look at the bigger picture, this crackdown is targeting a lot of people. We're talking over 900,000 CBP-1 users and maybe 800,000 people who already have deportation orders.
It shows you just how big the administration's effort is here.
Yeah.
They're trying to remove a lot of people. And while this Death Master file thing is unusual, it's part of a much larger strategy that could affect a huge part of the population.
And we can't ignore the economic side of this. What happens if we deport this many people? Industries like construction, hospitality, agriculture, they depend on immigrant labor. Losing that many workers, it could disrupt the economy in a big way.
And we know immigrants contribute a lot to the U.S. economy in all kinds of sectors. If they're gone, businesses could struggle to find workers, things could get less productive, and it could have a ripple effect throughout the whole economy. And then there's the human cost, which is harder to measure but just as important. Families separated, communities disrupted, the emotional toll, it's huge.
So what's next? What's going to happen? As of today, April 10th, the SSA hasn't said anything publicly about this, which, as sources kind of hint at, is maybe not surprising.
Yeah, the SSA is probably staying quiet because this is such a sensitive issue. And they know there could be legal problems down the road because of their role in this. They're caught between what the administration wants and what they're supposed to be doing as an agency.
But it seems pretty likely that groups like Democracy Forward are going to sue, and it feels like the courts are going to have to decide what happens with this policy.
Yeah, with all the legal questions about the Death Master file, about due process and privacy, the courts are probably going to get involved. They've been willing to challenge the administration's immigration policies before, and this case is especially unusual, legally speaking.
And for the 6,000 people who are living through this, their future is uncertain. Some of them might feel like they have to leave, but others are going to fight to stay to fix this. And sources remind us that throughout history, people have resisted even when things seemed hopeless. And with the legal challenges coming, there's a chance this policy won't even be able to be implemented.
It's amazing how resilient people can be, how determined they are when facing something this huge. A lot of these immigrants have put down roots, they've built lives here, they're going to try everything they can to stay.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to bring it back to you, the listener. Why should you care about this, even if you're not an immigrant yourself?
Well, this is about how the government works, about whether they're overstepping their boundaries. Are they allowed to use systems like Social Security for political goals? If they can do it to one group, they can do it to others. And that's something everyone should be concerned about.
Exactly. It's not just about immigrants. Today it's them. Tomorrow it could be someone else. We need safeguards. We need to make sure the government can't just use its power to harm people without a fair process. And the economic impacts, they could affect everyone. Labor shortages, economic instability, it could hit us all.
We're all connected. What happens to one part of society affects the whole system. So ignoring the economic risks here would be a big mistake.
And at the end of the day, no matter what you think about immigration, this is a human story. Being declared dead by the government while you're still alive, that's surreal, it's disturbing. It shows how much power bureaucracy has over people's lives and how quickly things can change, how rules that seem solid can suddenly shift and leave people in situations that are, frankly, unbelievable. This story is still unfolding and it could have major consequences for a lot of people.